Okay, so actually, I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick. Thank you for the feedback, everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks for the help. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, I don't hear them. I have them turned off for me, because otherwise it's just way too loud in my ears. I can't adjust the volume for them on my side, but I can change it how it is for you guys. Don't I don't know why that is. So, like I said at the beginning of the show, I wanted to, if you're in my Discord and Blizzrat's here, Northern Troopers here, a few other people that are regulars in the Discord, you know that everybody loves to heckle me about dropships. The M2 is the best dropship. Any ship is a dropship, or blah blah blah. And I figured it was finally time to do a segment explaining why those things, why every ship isn't a dropship. Why the M2 isn't a dropship. Because they are things that what defines a dropship, and why Star Citizen ascribes to the sort of traditional sci-fi, definition of what a dropship is because they are implementing tech and features within the game that bring very, very traditional sci-fi aspects of sci-fi and even real life physics and science into how dropships would work. And that's why it's dropships in the definition that CIG ascribes to is the more traditional and more science-based definition, in that a dropship is meant to carry personnel and cargo from a carrier ship in orbit to the surface and back, often in combat conditions, and it's meant to do it quickly. And so it's, they have to be the appropriate size to fit on a carrier. They have to be the appropriate size in order to do that job in a timely fashion. But they also have to be configured in a way, a shuttle does meet the definition of a dropship, but if dropships are generally ascribed more towards being landing craft, and so they have to be rugged to survive combat conditions. And they have to be configured in a way that makes tactical sense, which is why the dropships in Star Citizen are the way they are. So, one of the things that that people say when they ask, like, oh well, why would anyone ever use a dropship? No one's ever going to be, no one's ever going to be grouping up with 20 other people, plus their crew in a Valkyrie to go take on a ground combat location. You never need, we're never going to have gameplay that requires that many people. No one's ever going to do any, want to group up with that many people. It's just for RPers. It's a niche thing, and the first aspect of that is the challenges with grouping up with people and getting into, creating pickup groups, so that way you're not having to coordinate ahead of time with your org in order to fill up a dropship, and that's the only time you ever bust out the Valkyrie and fill up all the seats is when you do a big org event. No, these are meant to be used regularly, not only as dropships but as transport for players and NPCs. But if you're wanting to do it with players, we need to be able to have the ability to create a group on the fly in order to do larger scale events where you need that many people and you need that many seats. And so they just talked about this at CitizenCon last year. The last bit of Siege of Orison would have been a great place for dedicated dropships. And eventually we're going to have stuff like that where it makes sense. We're just not there yet. And we're going to talk about the stuff that's getting worked on now and in the future that will get us there. But the first bit is that social aspect. Well, I'm going to pause the music for a second so we can listen to Benoit talk about what they talked about at CitizenCon last year in regards to grouping up.
Bigger shards. I know I'm the bigger shards guy now, but we're gonna have to find. That's cool, but as we navigate the verse, it's always very difficult to find people. We have a single channel. People are blasting, looking for groups. It's a bit awkward. You never know what you're gonna find. With bigger shards, I know I'm the bigger shards guy now, but we're gonna have a lot more players in there. There must be a better way.
Well, Ben, we have given this some thought. So, the second tab in the social app, introducing the Party Finder. So, the Party Finder, it's a dynamic system that's going to make it easy for you to find interesting and engaging gameplay. It's basically player-powered matchmaking. So, if you are looking for more players, just go in here, advertise your party, give it an informative name like Ben has done here.
Space combat fun times.
And you could even set things like a specific contract that you want to play, or roles that you're looking to fill. Maybe you need gunners, engineers, pilots.
Meat shields.
Maybe that. You could also limit the number of members. You might want to do some, again, specific content, so you want to do with a set number of members in the party, or you might want a tight-knit group. That's something that I would like very much. Maybe you just don't want to split the contract rewards, right? So once you have that information, then it's time to list your party.
And then people are going to be applying to.
So, let's go ahead and turn the music back on. Here, I'll move this off screen so that way it doesn't, whoops. So that way it doesn't interfere with the video. So CIG is already talking about this. And there's a reason that Benoit was up there. This is a tech venture, and Benoit is the chief technical officer, but he mentioned bigger shards. Well, in the last year, we have gone from 100, a little over 100 plus player shards to 600 to 700 player shards. That is essentially the max capacity of a single replication layer to function, in terms of max number of connections. Because remember, everyone on the shard, all the players, as well as the servers in the shard, are all connected to that replication layer. So the replication layer has to be able to handle the transfer of data from players to servers and back and servers to players. It's all moving through that replication layer. Well, with dynamic server meshing, which we just read that they're working on as part of the monthly report for May, with dynamic server meshing, that means that a shard is no longer a single replication layer, and is no longer limited to, is no longer bound by the population, the throughput limits, the connection limits of a single replication layer. If more people want to log into that shard, then more replicants will spin up in order to connect to those additional players and additional servers to simulate that greater player density and NPC density and entity density as the shard grows in player population. So, as an example right now, if we have one replication layer, one replicant managing Stanton and Pyro, and we've got 10 servers, I think it is the configuration, 5 and 5, 6 and 4, whatever. Well, you could very quickly go from a single replicant handling a single planetary system, a single replicant handling a single planet, a single replicant handling a single landing zone, and a handful of servers assigned to that replicant in order to simulate all the NPCs and all the players. And so we're looking with dynamic server meshing, even with just V1, at potentially a tenfold, maybe even more, increase in player count per shard, which is just nuts. Now, granted, that probably won't happen until we probably get our third system. Those two things will probably coincide. But if you can imagine having, even with dynamic server meshing v1, thousands of players across 3 systems, and having this new social system in order to find people and group up, as well as having that many more replicants and that many more servers within a shard, and being able to have that many more servers simulating that many more NPCs, you can have much larger scale content with more players, with more NPCs, that requires a larger group to be able to do it. And so instead of doing a pickup group with just a few people from your Discord or a few people from your guild, your org, or a handful of people that you found in God forbid, the chat, we're gonna need this in order to be able to group up to do the content that is just random missions, because they're larger scale, they have more NPCs. You're not going to be able to run around with just soloing a bunker or doing a distribution center with you and 2 or 3 friends. You're going to need squads of people. You're going to need a lot more people to be able to do this larger scale content, and you won't always be able to rely on just your org. You're going to have to do pickup groups just like you did in any other MMO. That's what a dropship is for. A dropship is to move your pickup group to the dungeon, to the mission that you're going to go do that requires, a dozen plus people or something like that. And CIG has been planning this all along. The only problem is they started releasing dropships a couple years in advance of when they thought server meshing was going to be in and working. And here we are in 2025. So again, just like the Reclaimer coming out in advance of Salvage, the dropship, being meant to carry a whole bunch of people to content, came out long before we needed to carry a whole bunch of people to content. So that's the social aspect. Hold on, I need to pull up my notes. And so we also talked about server meshing.
But it's still going to cap.
So, this has been the idea for years. And this is why Chris Roberts was talking about this, server meshing back in 2018 as part of the plan. Guess what else released in 2018 at the CitizenCon? The fucking Valkyrie. This was this is all part of the plan. This has always been part of the plan. We just have taken a lot longer to get there than anyone ever thought would happen. But let's listen to what Chris said back in 2018 regarding what their ideas were for server meshing and player counts, in this context.
Experience, and this is our ability to go, right now we have about 50 players on a server. We probably will be able to increase that number because of band culling and stuff, but it's still going to cap out at a certain level. With server meshing, we'll be able to get to thousands of players playing concurrently in the same locations, star systems. They're not all going to be able to have 1,000 people dogpiling together. They won't be able to render it all at the same time, but you certainly will be able to have 1,000 people on the planet of Hurston, for instance. So the server meshing is the last key piece, because that will allow us to have a truly...
And this is before we even got to the version of server meshing that we have now, that they are working towards right now. This back in 2018, they weren't working with the replication layer model of server meshing. I won't go into that, but back then they didn't imagine they could do what they're getting ready to do in the near future with dynamic server meshing. They were already looking at, we could probably easily do 1,000 people on a planet. With what we have going forward, you can have thousands of people on a planet. In a single area, you could have essentially a single replication layer handling a large area around like a distribution center, with hundreds of players. At least dozens, if not hundreds of players, all in a battlefield-sized map, with lots and lots of NPCs and stuff going on, because it's all on a single replication layer which is literally, in the same stack as the servers doing the simulation, and that's why we can do this without any sort of loss. Now it's going to take a lot of work to a lot more work to get there, and a lot of optimizations, and they have to obviously work on the rendering aspect, which we know about Vulkan, but that's where we're at, and that's how we get to the point where we need dropships to bring lots of people to larger scale content. That's why in the lore for the Valkyrie, they specifically mention, the Valkyrie hasn't been used for the large scale invasions that it was designed for. Hasn't yet been used for large scale invasions it was designed for. What do you think is going to happen? We're going to be dropping players and NPCs onto Virgil to retake Virgil or something like that. It's that, dropping players and NPCs onto Charon or the planets in the Nexus system, to fight back pirates and rebels. And we're already working our way there. Like, they're already pushing player caps, pushing the limits of what's stable and performant on a single replicant. The shards, over 600 players, pushing over 700 players. It's very variable, and so they're testing it right now to see where those pressure points are. So the next aspect of notes. The next aspect of what makes dropships important, what makes them necessary, is right now. Right now, your suit has not unlimited, but it takes a long time to run out of air in your suit if you're in vacuum or a hostile atmosphere. And life support isn't a thing on ships, and life support isn't even going to be in the first iteration of engineering. But a dropship, one of the things they've talked about for dropships is that dropships will have sufficient life support. Dropships, but also people transport ships, your Genesis Starliner, they have to have sufficient life support to support the number of people who are designed to be on board. And so right now you can dogpile in any ship, and everybody just lies down on the floor, and have Hominis Dominus, you have a dropship. Well, in the future, that won't be a thing. You won't be able to, because your suit, eventually your suit, and I meant to find the quote for this from Richard Tyrer. This is from CitizenCon 2020. But they talked about how eventually your suit, your armor will have resource network built into it as well. And so if it's a vacuum rated suit, it will consume air. And you'll have to refill that air in some way, shape, or form. It will use power, and you'll have to have batteries. Different modules that you attach onto your suit will utilize different resources based off what they do. But so you won't be able to just dogpile everyone into a Pisces and lie flat on the ground, and everybody, because you won't have the life support, and you won't be able to. Even if you did rely on your suits, everybody's wearing a vacuum rated suit. Well, now while you're on your way to the target, you are consuming the suit resources that you would need while you are on the target, while you're doing the mission. And you're consuming it while en route. And so it's like, yeah, that's a choice, but a dropship is meant to get you there and provide the atmosphere within the ship, so that way you're not consuming those suit resources if you're going to a hostile atmosphere. There's no atmosphere. It's a hostile atmosphere. Your suit's ability to generate heat to keep you warm, that will run off your battery. So if you are in a colder environment, and the ship you're on isn't able to maintain enough warmth because the life support isn't there to keep people, warm or cool or comfortable or everything, that will all play into how dropships are meant to work. But that's a confirmed thing, is part of the life support aspect of dropships and being able to support the people on it. Did talk about how ship engineering and hacking go hand in hand at our Bar Citizen. Yeah, I think that's part of why they're working on hacking right now and why it was probably delayed. And this is just me spitballing. But I think because hacking has to interact with components and engineering, if we didn't have those things in, what would be there to hack? Or would they have to refactor hacking in order to get after engineering came in? So it sucks, but it makes sense now that engineering is finally coming along. We're seeing them finally work on hacking that, okay, it isn't just, hacking a door so you can board the ship. It's, no, you want to hack to disable. You got to hack to interfere. You talked about it, non-kinetic PvP or even non-kinetic PvE. That's part of hacking. But so life support is a significant aspect of what makes a dropship. Is it has to be able to support the life that's on board. And if your ship isn't ready to do that, isn't capable of supporting, the dozen, people, the 20 people you got on board, it's not going to be able to do that function. It's not going to be able to function as a dropship. And that's part of what dropships are designed to do. And they have said that the dropships will have sufficient life support to do that, along with ships like the Genesis and the E1 and future ships that do people transport. So the next thing on the list is the gravity generators. So when they implemented the force reactions, so you're flying your Valkyrie, you're flying any ship, and you've got people walking about, and you do a sudden maneuver, and it throws people onto the ground. That's the first iteration of force reactions. That is not the end state. And so Jared and John Crew just talked about this recently, and again, this is something that they're working on right now. And gravity generation, it isn't the first, I don't think it's included in the first part of engineering, but we're going to be seeing it essentially as engineering rolls out over the next year or so. And they're going to be implementing it how John Crew described. And then you won't be able to just not only clown car people because of the lack of life support, but you won't be able to clown car people because they won't be able to lie down on the ground to avoid the issues of force reactions. So let's see what John had to
currently,
say. Here, we're going to rewind 5 seconds, and I'll pause the music. Actually, give me one. Here, we're going to let him... hold on 1 second. I'm going to use the bathroom. I got to take a bathroom break. Okay, I'm back. All hail the mighty chair. Did you guys see? This is my new chair. I got a refurbished Herman Miller, right? Oh gosh. The really nice ergonomic office chairs. I bet's on him returning with ice cream. There's no ice cream. Yeah, sorry, not today. I really wish I had some. I literally just finished the last slice of my Father's Day cake last night. I've been slowly working my way through that. All hail chair. Yeah. And no joke. it is ridiculously comfortable. I bought myself the cake. So, and the only reason I bought the cake is because the twins' birthday was on the 11th, and so I was walking by the bakery while I was getting groceries with Boone, and there's a sign on top of the bakery case that said baby's first birthday cake free with purchase of 8-inch cake. And I was like, oh, well, I could get a first birthday cake free for the kids, so that way the babies could have their little smash cake, you know? Yeah, it's one of the little like I don't know, it's like a 4 or 6-inch cake or whatever. And I was like, okay, so if all I have to do is buy a cake to get them their first birthday cake, yeah, you happily jumped on that diabetes sword. Oh yeah, I flying leap onto it, and of course the Father's Day cake is conveniently positioned right next to the baby's first birthday cake, and I was like, well, that's a sign. I can take a hint. So I bought a Father's Day cake, and I got them to give me 2 baby's first birthday cakes because I showed them pictures of my twins. I was like, hey, it doesn't say only one. It says baby's first birthday cake free. And I was like, I've got 2 babies having their first birthday. And they're like, okay, fine. They're cute. And so they gave me the cakes for the twins for free with the purchase of my Father's Day cake. So the babies got to have their smash cake, and I had a Father's Day cake. And of course, like, you know, it wasn't a very big cake, but, you know, like my wife and our au pair had a slice with me the first night, and after that they didn't have any more, and so I had to eat the other half of this cake by myself, and it's taken me, you know, a week or whatever it's been to get through it all, because I didn't want to die of diabetes sweats. All right, let's listen to what John has to say about gravity generators and such
before you go to China.
Currently, marine seats on ships feel underutilized. Will they have unique functions in the future?
Assuming this is
Drop seats.
Drop seats. Yes, they sort of do already, but it's sort of underutilized or unnoticed feature in that we do impart G-forces onto loose actors within ships. So for drop ships, if you have 20 people crammed in the back of a Valkyrie and the pilot does a hard turn, you're all ragdolling and falling over. It doesn't happen really as much as we want or the way we want it. It's very binary at the moment, like big impulse happens, everyone falls over. Whereas the way Chris has talked to me about it is your gravity generator on ships, which is not yet a physicalized item but will be, sort of lags in its compensation of gravity. So rather than it being too much gravity, everyone fall over, it's hard turn, gravity's failing, everything starts getting loose, and if it continues, then people start not necessarily falling over, but almost like EVAing inside the ship because the gravity cannot keep up with the force and the directions. So then, being sat in the seats, you're not having to deal with any of that. But the counter of that is we want to make dropships be more utilized. At the moment, they're probably not tanky enough to, like, they don't have enough health to survive the drop-in versus other ships. So we've got to bump that up to get people using them.
Dropships are literally the living manifestation of putting all your eggs in one basket.
They need to survive the drop for people to bother using them. So it's sort of cyclical thing.
The Zeus's design is...
So he touched on 2 things. We're going to touch on the armor and survivability part towards the end here. Pardon me. But so with the way that they want gravity generators to work is if you are overcoming, you know, with your maneuvers and stuff, if you're overcoming the gravity generator's ability to, you know, essentially create a normal downward 1G, then your people will float up in the air, your people will be pushed down onto the ground, your people can be thrown, you know, and they have talked about how they want those. I've never had it happen to me. I don't think it's in, but they want the what they just talked about. They want that to be able to cause injuries. And so not only will the drop seats prevent you from, keep you seated down, and you're not going to get thrown all over the place and thus not injured. The other thing that they will do is they won't import. If you're in the drop seat, you have the G-force mitigation. You have essentially the internal dampening, just like a pilot seat does. And
will even allow the player to conceal.
The other aspect of drop seats is, so they're going to essentially require you to be in those seats when you're making a hot drop. And I'm going to explain why you're going to need to be in those seats, because everybody's going to be like, well, I just will fly more gently, fly more slowly. Well, that's not what dropships are supposed to do. They need to survive the drop. Part of that is being more survivable. Part of that is you need to get to the target quickly, and you need to have your approach be as fast and
part of the crew, part of the ship.
Hey, Sergeant Opsec, thanks for the follow. Thanks for coming and hanging out.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
So if you can imagine you are approaching a target. And if you're approaching at full speed, but then in order to not overshoot the target, you have to start braking in order to not overshoot it. Well, as you're braking, you are moving more and more slowly. You're more and more of an easy target during that braking period. That's not a good thing. You don't want to be an easy target. With helicopters, in order to do this, we use aerodynamic braking. And I'm not going to explain how that works, but essentially it's allowing, making the helicopter less aerodynamic, so that way it slows itself down without having to use as much of the rotor speed to do it. And so that what the dropships are designed to do, and I'll explain why all of them are designed to do this, is be able to brake really fast. So that way that period of you decelerating as you approach the target is as short as possible. So you have to spend as much time at top speed and maneuverability on your way to the target as possible to shorten that window of vulnerability, or make you as limit your vulnerable period as much as possible. And part of that is tech that has already been worked on. But the other part of drop seats, if you're going to be forced into drop seats, well, what if you have to be able, you don't want to have to, you have to be able to wear the gear that you want to wear, so that way you can hop right out, get into the action. And that's the other part of jump ships or drop ships, is those drop seats need to allow for that. And let's see, I think I got the right timestamp. Hey, Sergeant Opsec, I am a civilian flight paramedic, as well as a Army National Guard flight paramedic. I'm literally actually going flying tomorrow. We have a new rescue piece of rescue equipment. I don't know anything about it. This is the first time hearing it. That's we are purchasing, and so we're getting training on it tomorrow. I have never been in the situation where we had to auto rotate. We have to train on it, and so I've auto rotated more times than I can count. I do not like it. I know the pilots can think it's kind of fun being in the backseater. It's like a roller coaster, and I do not like that feeling. I do not like it. Sam, I am. I think I got the right timestamp. Let's see if this is the right timestamp. We'll let it play for a minute.
Smaller weapons from security, should the need arise. Another new addition we're going to be introducing is flight penalties based on the mass and size of your armor and clothing. You'll still be able to fly in medium and heavy armor, but you're restricting the precision of your control. If you're enclosed, like our leader is here, or a flight suit or light armor, you'll be able to fly unrestricted. Now, if we look at an overview, we've cherry-picked 6 generalized stats to give you like a high-level understanding of how various clothing and armors we specialized. This is by no means a comprehensive. The leader has obvious reasons. Members.
Did I get the wrong timestamp? Oh, I think I grabbed this timestamp because I wanted to talk about how, so they're based off the seat that you're in. And again, we just talked about why you're going to need to be in a seat. The seat will determine what you can wear. They'll have penalties and such. Um, and so, obviously, if you are flying a ship, you're going to want to be in a flight suit or not or not in armor at all and just clothes in order to not have those penalties. And so not every seat is going to offer the same benefits. The drop seats are going to offer that internal dampening of G forces, just like a pilot seat offers you in being in a flight suit. And they also will allow you to have that while wearing up to potentially heavy armor. It's something that they're still discussing. The last mention I found of it was in regarding to from the Legionnaire for the Q&A Legionnaire, but they asked what equipment can be transported by the boarding team. For example, can it carry heavy weapons, and can heavy armor be worn in the jump seats? There is space on board to store heavy special weapons and heavy armor. We are working with the core gameplay pillar to ensure that if heavy armor cannot be worn in the seats, as not all seats will have this restriction. So the restriction isn't going to be there, but you'll be able to wear, pretty much wear that heavy armor. But being in a jump seat or a drop seat, a jump seat and a jump seat in a drop ship, jump seat in a drop ship, you will have the benefits of those seats while wearing combat armor. Versus if you're in a seat that isn't for that. If you look at the seats in the Valkyrie, and then you look at the seats in the back of the Cutlass Black, or some of those other fold-down seats in other places, those won't offer those same benefits. You will still have those G-forces, and we'll see why we're going to learn more about why those G-forces are important, because it isn't just the maneuvers that you're doing, getting thrown around and falling down. Is you don't want to come to the landing zone and be blacked out because the ship rapidly braked and did some maneuvers in order to shorten that time where you're vulnerable. So we're going to look at some lore, because lore equals gameplay, and there's a few bits of lore that connect together that paint a picture regarding dropships and regarding jump seats that is cohesive over several years. And it's something that they've stuck to. So this is called the Untold Tales, the Unexpected Guests. And this is serialized Star Citizen lore. So in this part of the passage, though many outside of the Marines, the UE Marines, have heard of the nail, few have seen it in action. UPark, which is like DARPA for the UE scientists, are believed to have reverse engineered the tech from the feared Vandal boarding spikes, which is the boarding torpedo. You see it. Switch to autopasta. What do you mean, autopasta? The spikes, the cleavers, are the boarding torpedoes that you see. We saw in the Squadron 42 demo. It's literally a torpedo that they shoot at a ship, and it goes as fast as a torpedo and slams into and cuts a hole into the side of the ship. And so you can imagine the G forces imparted on the occupant of that boarding torpedo when it's flying as fast as a torpedo and slams into a ship. You have to have internal dampening tech in order to mitigate those G forces. Believed to have reverse engineered the tech from the feared Vandal boarding spikes used in ship-to-ship combat, modifying the design to make it viable for a human occupant. The current nail can safely deploy a Marine from a ship in space to a planet surface in 90 seconds. This device is a technological marvel if correctly deployed, and a metal coffin if not. Oh, no worries, Victoria, you're good. So, the nails use this G-force, inertial dampening tech that we apparently acquired from the Vandal that they use in their boarding torpedoes to allow for drop pods, UE Marine nail drop pods, to come screaming out of the sky and slam into the ground and not turn you into paste. Now, if you read more about said nails, this is from the jump point regarding UE Marines. It was this one. So, unlike other UE forces, Marines do not deploy indiscriminately. A Marine is either stationed on Corrin for training or he is actively engaged in a combat operation. Marines do not protect convoys, interdict pirates, or garrison jump points. They invade planets, strike back at the Vanduul, and personally protect the Imperator. The most famed specialty of the Marines is space-to-surface landing operations. Marine shock troopers can drop from the sky in specially constructed individual rocket pods known as nails. Featuring the same internal dampener as a Hornet, a nail can deliver a trooper from the dropship to a specifically targeted location on a planet's surface within 90 seconds. So the fighters, that's why we're able to experience high G-forces in our fighters, is because they have... and obviously, we don't have the same military version, but it's the same tech, just civilianized, as the Hornet. So the same tech, the same inertial dampeners that we got from the Vanduul cleavers are used in the nails. They're also used in military Hornets and other fighters. And if we go on to read the jump point for the Legionnaire, and if you remember when the Legionnaire came out, tree in the middle of the night. Yeah, well, I mean, it's 11 o'clock my time. I got started a little bit late because of getting the kids down. So in this paragraph right here, the reason for the secrecy under which the rest of the Legionnaire's development was conducted has officially remained classified, although third-party reports suggest it was because the Navy unexpectedly made available a partially complete Vanduul Cleaver boarding ship for the team at Anvil to examine during the development process. Anvil corporate and military public relations sources continue to deny this, stating that the Legionnaire is a completely human engineering effort. So the Vanduul Cleaver boarding ship, which is they're talking about the boarding torpedo, which has the inertial dampening tech. Well, why would the Legionnaire need that inertial dampening tech? It's because the Legionnaire the UE model of the Legionnaire has also become celebrated for a flight maneuver that has become the goal of its top pilots, called the KISS. This crowd-pleasing maneuver involves two Legionnaires that approach each other seemingly at full speed. Full speed, playing essentially chicken, full speed head-to-head, carefully maneuvering so that they stop with their boarding collars touching front to front. So they're coming at each other full speed and then rapidly braking in order to just barely kiss and stop and touch their docking collars, their boarding collars. So they go from full speed to rapid deceleration to just kiss. That's why it's called the KISS maneuver. Well, in order to do that, you'd A, need big time deceleration. Hello, VTOLs. But B, in order for the pilot, the crew, as well as the boarding team to not black out during the maneuver, they need the Vanduul inertial dampening tech that's in the nails, that's in our best fighters. And it would be in, for the pilots and for the people in the jump seats. So that way they don't black out. Okay, well, we're connected, and well, all the boarders are snoozing away because they blacked out from the G-forces. In jump seats, just like in dropships, which essentially the Legionnaire is. What does the Legionnaire have that the Valkyrie also has? 4 rotating VTOLs. So, Mike Tyson, now Kith. So we've determined that we're going to have the ability to much more easily get together in much larger groups to take on much larger and more complex content requiring bigger groups, which will need to be transported by dropships. You won't be able to clown car by lying down on the ground. You won't have enough life support if you're not using a dropship. If you're not sitting in the jump seats, you won't get thrown around and injured. due to the lack of inertial dampening and g-force mitigation from the gravity generators, failing during maneuvers. But during your rapid deceleration as you approach to target, well, how's that going to be possible? Right now, dropships like the Valkyrie, you can either have VTOLs down or backwards. That is not the intent. They are working on the tech to make it so that way they can rotate dynamically in order to do that rapid braking that they need for the Legionnaire to do the KISS maneuver. KISS maneuver. So, let's see. Did I grab the wrong?
My favorite thing about the Mirai Fury.
So, that tech is called blend space tech, and it was developed for the Santakiai as well as for the Mirai Fury. And so that tech is already in. It just isn't, the flight model isn't developed to the point where they are going to continue to work on that tech to expand it onto the other ships. It doesn't have a star on the names. I'm pressing X to doubt. No joke. Good to see you, Dibley. So, and I forget this dev's actual name, which one this is, but so a player made this post back in 2023, about 2 years ago. Aren't a lot of ships' engines supposed to rotate for VTOL and or maneuvering? So they show it in this clip for the cutter. It was in the Terrapin commercial, the Valkyrie commercial, old legacy ships for the Freelancer. So aren't the engines on the Freelancer, Vulture, Constellation, Caterpillar, etc. supposed to rotate for VTOL maneuvering? They look like they're supposed to, and the Mist commercial even shows it doing so. The cutter, whose thrusters do rotate in a Kodo of ISC, specifically states that the cutter uses the Vulture's VTOLs, which don't V. I get that things change with time, but especially for the Vulture, it feels like a ship that will definitely be spending a lot of time hovering around crash sites should have the extra boost that downward-facing primary thrusters would provide. So let's learn more about this tech. We're in the beginning stages of developing the blend space tech that will allow the motion of the ships to drive rotations in the ship skeleton. So the thrusters are part of that ship skeleton. The VTOLs on the Terrapin, the VTOLs on the Valkyrie, for example. While intended for the new Santakiai, organic B-space animations may come in a future release as an update, as key tech art and engineering resources are limited but determined. I hope to fulfill long-held goals with the Xi'an Scout to have it move more squid-like and the hover bikes to have articulated nacelles. Once the B-space tech, blend space tech, is stable, we'll roll it out to various other ships where it makes sense. I've always wanted VTOLs to move like that landing scene in Prometheus. And so here, we can watch that really quick just for fun.
What is the atmosphere?
Atmosphere is 71% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, traces of argon gas.
Whoa, now that's weather.
Just like home.
Only if you're breathing through an exhaust pipe. CO2's over 3%. 2 minutes without a suit, you're dead. Peak, port side. Whoa, 52,000. Makes Everest look like a baby brother.
All right, take us round. Gonna use that as our point of entry.
Terrain data resing up. We've got a couple of hard spots. Could be metal.
No radio, no heat source. Nobody's home.
There is nothing in the desert, and no man needs nothing.
What was that?
Just something from a film I like.
Let's go through that gateway. Reduce airspeed by 100 knots. Going through. Nice and slow. Keep it steady, boys. There.
No, what are you doing?
Dr. Holloway, why don't you take a seat?
Right there. God does not build in straight lines.
Starboard side, this valley. Captain, do you think you can put us down there?
Yeah, it wouldn't be any good if I couldn't do that. Mr. Ravel, start at 90 degrees. One mile port bow.
1 mile port bow.
Engage landing sequence. Switch to manual.
Commence landing.
Easy does it.
Roger that.
Yeah, baby, yeah. Bringing it down in 5.
Preparing to fire RCS
4. 2. Easy does it.
There's a monster in your chest.
So you guys saw how the VTOLs, they rotated forward as they are decelerating in order to use the VTOL thrust to slow them down while still generating upward lift. So they say Caterpillar engines will not ever rotate, though. Boo. The Caterpillar engines should rotate, and they should put rotating VTOLs on the front of them as well. Freelancer looked crazy, so we nixed the 360-degree flips in the commercial, but since the geometry would support it, I would raise the possibility to re-add some motion back in with B-Space, maybe, but more design call. Various ships that already have rotating VTOLs should then be made to vector while maneuvering, such as the Idris, Reclaimer, Terrapin, and Mole, and several more, like the Valkyrie. So when they say vector, they're talking about what he just showed off is they don't just, you press a button and they rotate down to generate straight downward thrust. But as you are telling the ship to slow down, they will rotate into position in order to provide more lift as you're slowing, but then also provide retro thrust to slow you down. Well, what does that mean for a dropship? That's what the KISS maneuver is you're flying with VTOLs facing straight back, providing max thrust until the last point you need where you apply essentially space brake. And the VTOLs, if you apply max space brake and the VTOLs swing around and they apply max retro thrust in order to slow you down as much as possible in the shortest distance possible. That's what the KISS maneuver is. That's what dropships need to be able to do is you're flying your Valkyrie at the target. You see the landing zone. You're taking fire. You need to get on the ground as fast as possible without you don't want to have this long, slow deceleration burn because you're letting the retro thrusters on the front of the ship do all the work. No, you got to flip those VTOLs around to do what is in essence a KISS maneuver, but for a Valkyrie, or a Cutlass Black, or even a Prowler, any of the dropships like that. The Cutter will get VTOLs like that, but the Cutter only has 2. This is why the Valkyrie has 4. This is why the Legionnaire has 4. This is it's not so much for maneuverability; it's to be able to rotate and provide max full rearward thrust in order to rapidly brake you to allow the inertial dampener tech that we got from the Vanduul that's in the jump seats or drop seats to keep your people from feeling the G-forces. So as soon as you hit the ground, they didn't black out from 20 G's and you're like, okay, you guys can get out now, and they're all still doing that whole deal. That's what this is about. So we learn more about this tech in the ISC Get Furious. It's the same tech that's in here. This is part of the ship skeleton that animates based off of the inputs and changes dynamically. So let's read this. Listen to this little clip.
Wouldn't have fit in as many ships as it can. It's more maneuverable, it's faster, it's more heavily armed. It's got everything going for it.
My favorite thing about the Mirai Fury is definitely the thrusters.
We've managed to get fully 180-degree rotating main thrusters, meaning that we don't have specific retros. This also means that it's got much more efficiency when it comes to turning and strafing and all sorts of flight maneuvers, because it can put its main thrust in pretty much whichever direction it needs to go. They are...
That's the tech. That's what he's talking about. So these can rotate, on their spindles and everything. Well, the ones on the Valkyrie, I don't think they're going to necessarily do the fine animations that you saw in here. Where is it? Hold on. No. Hold on, I've got the... Let me pull up the Terrapin one from the Terrapin commercial really quick. It's trash day. Where is it? I know I have it somewhere. Didn't I just download it? Or maybe I just downloaded it on my laptop. Maybe that's why. Anyway, if you remember the Terrapin commercial, they vectored outward as well and articulated. But I don't know if the Valkyries will end up doing that. But what they talked about, they just said they don't have specific retro thrusters. So when you brake to slow down the ship, these spin all the way around and put thrust forward to brake, to provide braking. Well, right now, ships, all ships have retro thrusters in order to brake their forward momentum, unless you spin around and face the other direction and do essentially a retro burn. With the tech that they've built for the Santoki and for the Fury, etc., that same tech is what will be used on the Valkyrie to do what he was just talking about, where the Valkyrie thrusters won't just rotate into downward facing. They'd be able to swing forward and rapidly apply retro thrust to brake, to provide braking, really, really, really fast. That would apply a lot of G's, but also that's how you make it so you don't have this long period where you're super vulnerable. That's how you do that KISS maneuver that the Legionnaire is talking about. That's what necessitates you needing the inertial dampening in the drop seats, and you having to sit in those, is because you'll get thrown across. You'll be thrown against the bulkhead, and you'll black out, and you'll be useless once you hit the ground if you're not sitting in those things. That's why you need a dropship in order to get through that enemy anti-aircraft fire. To rapidly get down to the landing zone while there's fighters trying to shoot you down and such. You have to be able to do that quickly. And if your people on the, who are hitting the ground running can't hit the ground running because they're blacked out, well, then you're up a creek. So that's part of this whole recipe of everything that they need to implement in order to necessitate the use of dropships to be used in game. To give dropships the value of that we've always jokingly called the dropship tax. Well, it's the dropship tax is important. The reason you pay this much for the dropship is because no other ship can do these things. There's only a handful of true dropships, and there's no other ships that are designed to do this. And if you don't have these things, well, then you can't rapidly brake on approach to the target and you're much more vulnerable. You won't have the life support that you need to carry a whole bunch of people to get to the mission. You might have to make multiple trips, or have a bunch of people take ships that aren't needed for it, and it's not as efficient. The other aspect is, and we're about to get into that, but I wanted to play the clip from the flight model talking about the changes to the flight model. What if we just pack 130 guys in there so you can get thrown around? Yeah, you can get thrown around and everything, but you're not going to be able to do a hot drop in a ship that can't do a hot drop. If you can't rapidly brake, in that ship, because all you have is retro thrusters and you don't have VTOLs that rotate to do retro braking, well, then you're going to have to do this slow deceleration. That leaves you super vulnerable to getting shot down. It's why the M2 isn't a dropship. It's why the Starlancer TAC isn't a dropship, because you don't have VTOLs that rotate into forward position to allow for rapid deceleration, along with them just being huge ships, a lot of mass that you have to slow down. You have to do this much slower deceleration that leaves you really vulnerable to getting shot, and you don't have to get exploded. You just have to get damaged, so that way you can't make the landing. The ships that don't have the life support for carrying a whole bunch of people aren't drop ships. Ships that don't have the drop seats to mitigate those those G forces aren't drop ships. It's why it's necessary. So let's watch this part of the atmospheric flight model where they talk about transitioning to hovering, and how it dynamically tells the thrusters to do what they need to do to maintain that hover. This tech, along with this blend space tech, and we just read about in the monthly report in May how they reached a major milestone in the atmospheric flight model, how these transitions are more smooth and dynamic and realistic, blah, blah, blah. This advancing is why this can get implemented to allow for ships like the Valkyrie to do what they're intended to do. We're not there yet, but we are getting there.
IFCS will help you. So you're gonna bring down the speed, disconnect, purposefully put the ship into a stall. But don't worry, when we don't have the thrusters disconnected, IFCS will help you. So you're gonna bring down the speed more and more until you're reaching stall speed, which is about now, and then the thrusters will kick in and catch you. That means, however, you are now in a state that the thrusters don't.
So in this instance, just like happened in that Prometheus thing, if you are braking with those VTOLs and you're slowing down, your main thrusters, which are your main thrusters are VTOLs on the Valkyrie. I'm just using the Valkyrie as an example. They will rotate like this in order to generate enough lift at slow enough speed, and then eventually, if you apply enough brake, they'll rotate down enough and around, so that way they're facing forward to brake as much as you need in order to slow you down as much as you want to slow down. And so if you're only braking a little bit and you want to come in at a more gentle approach, you're not doing a hot drop, they come in at like this angle. But if you need to slow down in a hurry, it rapidly brakes and then transitions backward as you come down to the ground. Danger Hobo says, I was just thinking of the whole platoon in the CH-53 A debris. Yep, no, I've been there. But a CH-53 obviously can't do the types of maneuvers that a Blackhawk can, or a Huey, because it's big and fat and slow, which is kind of the difference between like a Valkyrie and an M2. It's like, yeah, they can both still hover, they can both still land like that, but one's going to have to do it a lot more slowly and carefully because it's a big fat walrus, compared to the other.
Right? So at the moment we have turned this up, but in the future you will not be able to hold this for long. So Brent, for example, now from a hover, strafe is
like they talked about that, you won't be able to hold the hover for long because they are hovering with maneuvering thrusters, which are meant for short bursts and overheat quickly. Whereas if you come to a stop like this with your ship with VTOLs, maybe it's the Reclaimer, maybe it's even the Idris, they'll be able to hold that hover a lot longer. Not indefinitely, but a lot longer. But you have to think about your thrust to mass ratio. Having VTOL thrusters on an Idris just means that it can actually land. It doesn't mean that it can sit at a hover. It means it can actually land. So thrust to mass ratio doesn't go out the window. That's why your thrust to mass ratio is so good on a ship like the Valkyrie, because it has to be able to brake really hard, but it also needs to be able to fly slowly at a near hover when it's doing like ground support type stuff, ground attack, ground support. Oh, dang it. I lost the timestamp on this one. No. Hold on. Okay, there it is. All right, so we talked about the flight model. We talked about we talked about the social system for grouping up with people in order to get the larger groups to do content. In order to get enough people, rather than just have to get a whole bunch of org mates or something like that, to be able to dynamically and quickly get a whole bunch of people to fill up your dropship. We talked about server meshing, which is going to allow for much, dynamic server meshing is going to allow for even larger, far larger than what we have right now, shard player counts, but also far larger NPC counts at locations in order to have much larger scale content. That's going to require more people, to the point where you need a dropship, you need a whole squad and then some. We talked about how you're going to need sufficient life support, and that's what dropships are for, because you won't be able to rely on your suit air, and you don't want to be using up your suit air if you're going to a hospital environment. So that's life support. We talked about how the gravity generators are meant to fail, and you will be, not just thrown around. You won't be able to mitigate getting thrown around by lying down on the floor. When the gravity generator is unable to compensate anymore, you'll get thrown around whether you're lying around on the floor, but you'll also black out, just like if you're the pilot. And in order to not have that happen, you'll have to be in a drop seat that you have in dropships, or jump seat like in dropships. If you'll have to sit in those seats if you want to wear full combat armor and be able to quickly get out and wear get in the fray. We talked about how that inertial dampening tech is in the Legionnaire, and that's why it's in the drop seats in the Legionnaire. For the KISS maneuver, it's why it's in the Valkyrie, for doing the same thing, because they all have rotating VTOLs, and the tech for VTOLs has already been developed. For VTOLs to rotate into the forward position to apply retro braking to allow for that KISS maneuver. It's already been developed, and as the flight model continues to develop, they will expand that onto the ships like the Valkyrie, the Terrapin, and such, where appropriate, so that way it can do the things like we've seen in the commercials. Now, the last thing, and John Crew alluded to it when he talked about after he talked about the gravity generators, is survivability. Dropships need to be able to survive to get down to the target to do what they're intended to do. And right now, because we don't really have armor, it's faked. Dropships really can't be any more survivable other than just increasing the health pool, and that has its own set of issues. Well, that's what Maelstrom is for. Maelstrom, that we learned about, is a material simulation. And so what they can do with Maelstrom is specify which ships have heavy armor, and the materials that the ships are made out of will be much more resistance to penetration and breaking up due to that heavy armor. And other ships won't have that. They won't have that heavy armor. They won't have that resistance to penetration and durability in terms of not breaking up and falling apart. and that will probably make them heavier, which is why they need the thrusters to be able to rotate forward to be able to slow them down when they're doing those hard deceleration burns on the approach to target. So let's listen to a little bit about Maelstrom, and we'll see how that applies to the actual dropships that we know about.
To achieve all this, we gave each physical geometry instance an identifier to be able to uniquely identify it within the universe. So your Gladius wing is your Gladius wing. We added physical material and damage properties that can now be replicated across the network. One of them, and that's the most important one, we call integrity. And this determines how much structural or internal integrity a physical geometry has. Integrity is modified from dissipating, or rather absorbing, energy from kinetic impacts or energy weapons, and also in the future from absorbing energy from external factors like extreme temperature or fire, as you've seen before. We also track which physical part or geometry belongs to which visual geometry and which high-level entity. So
not only will your dropships, which are meant to be heavily armored, be resistance to, have the resistance to energy weapons and penetration from ballistics and stuff, making them much more rugged than other ships that, so again, if you bring in this ship and, you're using the wrong ship for the job, you've clown carred a bunch of people into a freelancer, or maybe, I don't know, a Starfarer or something. So you don't have rotating VTOLs. You have this, you don't have actual, marine style drop seats. And so you have to do this slow deceleration burn using your retro thrusters. You're super vulnerable. You can't do these hard maneuvers because all your people will, fall over and black out. And you're getting shot this entire time. You might get shot down. You might get damaged to the point where you can't, go to a hover and make the landing. You don't have the armor to protect you. The durability. Maybe you're flying through atmosphere. They talked about other stressors and stuff. If you're flying through a really bad storm, the durability of a Valkyrie or the Prowler might make it more resistant to damage from getting thrown about in severe turbulence. That could be a thing. But he talked about how the Maelstrom, and the integrity and the resistances, and the material simulation that gives it these properties. And this is what's going to be the heavy armor that dropships need, that John Crew talked about to give it decipherability. Well, what? Oh, we're going to wait for it to come back around because it restarted. Every dropship has been said to be heavily armored. Every single one. And there we go. So the Cutlass Steel that everybody loves to joke about. Okay, it's still a dropship. Armor. When shields aren't quite enough, mil-spec armor keeps your personnel safe and sound. There it is. So it just, all this means is that the Cutlass Steel, the material that the Cutlass Steel, and there's a reason it looks like this, the material of the Cutlass Steel will have more integrity, more resistance, have more durable properties than the Cutlass Black, or even the Cutlass Red. That's all that means. Here we'll pull up the. This is the Valkyrie brochure, and it's actually the brochure from 2018 CitizenCon, which included the Valkyrie brochure because that's when it was released. So. Heavy armor all around and built-in countermeasures complete the Valkyrie's formidable offensive-defensive package. Armor, heavy. The Prowler. Let's see. It's where was it? There we go. If it does attract hostile attention, the Prowler is equipped with not only heavy armor, but utilizes the phalanx shield tech. So, Prowler, dropship, heavy shield tech, or heavy armor. If you go to the Anvil Asgard transmission, the Asgard is a dropship. It's just meant for moving vehicles and cargo and not people. Heavy armor. The Prowler utility is a variant of the Prowler. It's still heavily armored. They just talked about how they made changes in the patch notes to the Prowler as well as the Prowler utility to give it the durability that they want it to have as a dropship. The Legionnaire is meant to be heavily armored. It's not a dropship, it's a boarding ship, but it functions in it has the same feature set, being that it has the rotating VTOLs, it has jump seats. It's baby's first dropship. So that's why, in a nutshell, all of these things that we just talked about are what makes a dropship, and why dropships have a very specific role in Star Citizen, one that hasn't really been realized up until not now, but in the near future. It's going to be necessary. It isn't just going to be RP and looks cool. It's going to be, you need to be in those jump seats. You need to be in a dropship. Otherwise you aren't going to be able to do that more difficult content, that larger scale content that necessitates the use of a dropship. That's the whole premise behind the Valkyrie, is these larger scale landings. And whether it's one Valkyrie with 20 people, or multiple Valkyries where you're going in with a whole bunch of NPCs, the sky's the limit for CIG. But it's why they have made dropships. It's why they've made dropships expensive. It's because they have a plan. Unfortunately, that plan is complicated and multifactorial and has taken a long time to develop, but we are getting really close. And for me, being the Valkyrie is my favorite ship, I want to be a dropship pilot. I'm very excited to see all these things come together, and for it to finally work as advertised. And before I let you go, I think we should probably look at the Terrapin commercial, just so you can get a better idea of those VTOLs and how they're supposed to animate. Because they do it, you see it briefly in the Valkyrie commercial, but I think the Terrapin does it in a cooler way. Anvil Terrapin. This is it. So you saw how they were moving around back and forth in order to maintain a hover. They are moving in opposite directions. They're vectoring outward and moving around. That's what the IFCS, the Intelligent Flight Control System, alongside the blend space tech, is meant to do. Is to say, okay, I want it to do this, and it will move the thrusters in the way that is most optimal to do that. And to me, not only do I love my Valkyrie, and I'm super excited to be a dropship pilot and to do the KISS maneuver, but instead of with another ship with the Legionnaire, I want to be able to essentially do that with a landing zone, rapidly approach and then stick that landing hard, minimizing the time where I'm a target, but also having the armor to get you there, and having the G-force mitigation to make it so me and the troops don't black out. But seeing the Anvil Terrapin do that, and then hearing about how people were like, oh, it's the Terrapin has so much wasted space. It's not a good the Terrapin. What's what do they call the medical Terrapin? I forget now. Anyway, seeing how people called it, oh, it's wasted space and everything like that. Yeah. And the Terrapin's strength is not in the bed that it brings. The Terrapin's strength is that it has those VTOLs that are meant to rotate and maneuver, and allow it to maneuver like that. Plus having the armor, because it's Anvil and it's the Terrapin has always been a heavily armored ship. So you can imagine the combat search and rescue ability of a ship that can A, hold a hover, B, rapidly come to a hover above a wounded person or something like that while taking the fire because it's heavily armored. Like the Medipin, the medical Terrapin, is going to be a beast of a CSAR ship because of the flight characteristics from its VTOLs with this upcoming tech and the armor. So these things don't just, like all of this applies to dropships, but some of these things also apply to other ships with VTOLs that will really allow for them to come into their own, similarly to how dropships will be able to in the near future. But that is all that I have for this Spectrum Pulse. I hope that you guys have found it interesting and informative. As always, these will be posted up on my YouTube in the coming days, and in the description below will be the link to the show notes, so you can see all these sources for yourself, verify them, share them with friends. So let's go ahead and we'll switch screens